Hello, everyone. Welcome to Christian's Colloquy. I'm so happy that you could join me again this episode for another interview on the channel. This time I have with me Adam. Adam, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
I'm so glad this could finally happen, that Adam and I have been talking about this for a long time. We've known each other for, I don't know how long it is now, maybe a year or two, but we've had a lot of fantastic conversations. And I brought him on today because when it comes to our topic today, seminary, thinking about seminary, applying to seminaries, he's somewhat of an expert, and he's put in a lot of time researching this and exploring this for himself. So today I thought I'd get him on here so that he could share some of what he's learned, some of his wisdom on the topic, and hopefully give some of my viewers who are thinking about seminary or theological education some insight or some advice. So before we get into that interview section, I want to give Adam an opportunity to share a little bit about himself and let you guys know what he's about. So Adam, if you could introduce yourself.
Well, as Christian stated, my name is Adam. I have a YouTube channel called Faithful Academics. It's also the same videos go to my Facebook page over there. And I got my undergraduate education from the New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary. I graduated last semester, so I actually got to participate in a graduation. Unfortunately, my friends could not this semester, where I got a degree in Christian ministry. And I am in a year going to be starting my master's in divinity. I'm pretty sure I know what school I will be going to, but I have one more to visit, so I will not say what it is on the record.
Okay, that's good. Thank you for introducing yourself. And I'm very glad to hear that you had that graduation ceremony. That must feel good, and that final closure. And I must say, I'm looking forward to hear how your seminary time will go. So we'll probably have to have you back on eventually when you're in the program and you could talk about it again. But for now, today, we're going to be talking about, I guess, those stages before seminary, thinking about applying to seminary and just choosing seminaries and what to look for. So I guess to start it all off, my first big question is, why seminary? Why apply to seminary? And maybe you want to speak to your personal reasons or give some general points. It's up to you, but why go to seminary?
Well, I would say the reason why anyone should go to seminary is because they have a calling to do some form of ministry, and they want to be challenged for the ways that they think. Matthew Everhart actually has a video called "Why Go to Seminary," and he says, he said essentially the biggest consideration is not what you know, but what you don't know. And what do you not know about church history? What do you not know about ministry? What do you not know about biblical counseling? I think a lot of the things that are good for you in your ministry are the things that you're going to learn in your local church from your local pastor or elders or even deacons. But there comes a point in which the knowledge is limited. And one of the benefits of going to receive a seminary education is that you're going to have a group of older men who have the education and the experience to show you the things that you don't know and that even your mentors from your local church do not know.
Yeah, that's good to think about, where seminary pulls on wisdom from a variety of people from different backgrounds, where it comes alongside your local church and what they're able to offer. So I really like that. And I think that's an important point to make, that it's not one or the other. Ideally, you're learning specific skills from the local church, but seminary, you have those committed individuals who offer maybe something deeper in certain aspects, but also bring that wisdom from wherever their background is. So that's a good start, I think.
I would also like to add on to that, with these older men who are dedicated, and you hit it right on the nail there. They have an opportunity to be dedicated to research. That's their job. That's their 9 to 5. Your local pastor, man, I mean, he might have a ton of book knowledge, but that's not his job.
Right.
And studying under these guys who literally, they write books, they've written their dissertation probably many years ago. That's their job. And
Right.
so I do think, and I do want to emphasize this, go to your local church. You're going to learn a lot from the local ministry. But at the same time, recognize that you're not only just studying under one man, but under several men while you're receiving a seminary education who are dedicated to the academic studies.
Yeah, that's great to think about. And I think that gives an appreciation for what goes on in the seminary, where it is it's godly individuals who are there teaching. But I think that's so important. It's their 9 to 5 to teach, to research, and they can just dig deeper in a way. When your local pastor, if he's a great local pastor, he's going to be pulled in many different directions, counseling, preaching. And you have these gentlemen in seminary, a lot of them who put in pastoral time, who know that world. But then your church history prof, he's all about church history. He'll be able to answer those questions. Your apologetics guy, he eats and sleeps and reads this stuff all the time. So that's a great thing to be thinking about. And I think for guys going into seminary, and maybe you're thinking about this or have thought about this, these are individuals where they're not only going to be interested in their field, but they're going to be interested in applying their field. So I think a lot of people think about maybe seminary and people who want to be pastors and think, oh, why go to seminary? It's full academics. But if you're going to probably seminaries you're considering and seminaries I'm familiar with, you're going to be getting these highly educated guys focusing on research who have that mind for how people can apply it wherever they're going to go. So it's definitely bringing those worlds together. That's great.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So building off from that, that's why go to seminary. So I know that a particular interest and passion of yours is talking about and thinking about how should we maybe evaluate seminaries. People go to seminary for different reasons and go to seminary with different maybe budgets or realities, but maybe you can give some insight when it comes to the general scene. What should we, or what are you in particular looking for in a seminary as you consider attending there?
Right. So, kind of before I answer that question, I do want to bring up a little bit of my journey to getting to the important questions, which was when I first considered going to a seminary, my thought was I want to go to a seminary that teaches biblical inerrancy.
Mm.
Now, here's the problem. People define biblical inerrancy differently. And
Ah,
so that's when I learned that you have to study seminaries like you would study for a research paper.
right.
And it's intense. And I'm sure that you've been on that journey and many other men have been on that journey. And I would encourage you, if you're not on that journey, maybe you're thinking to yourself, well, I'm just going to go to my local seminary, the one that's right down the road. Don't do that. You're going to waste your time. Research that local seminary. It might be great. I'm not saying it won't be, but I'm also saying consider actually researching that local seminary and a broad amount of seminaries, because your seminary education is going to last you a lifetime for something that's only going to take you 4 to 5 years. But to get to your question, the things to consider would definitely be biblical inerrancy, but it's also biblical sufficiency. And also, how integrated do you want the program to be? And I think that's the big question that you need to ask yourself. How in depth do you want your seminary education to be? Do you want your seminary education to be a mile wide and an inch deep, or do you want it to be a mile wide and a mile deep?
Mm.
And in order to get that type of education, you have to ask questions that are not only important to you, but what you think is important for ministry in general.
Right.
And for example, some of the things that would be important for you would be community. If you think having a community is important, find a seminary that has a good community. Don't lie to yourself and say community is not important, the academics are important, because you're going to go there and you're going to be miserable.
Mm.
If community is important for you, find a seminary that has a good community. But as far as the things that are good for ministry, you want to go to a seminary that's good on pastoral ministry. You want to find something that's good on the languages. I mean, you want to find something that's integrated. I was talking to an individual a while back, and one of the things that he had told me was one of the downsides to a seminary that has a ton of MA programs and a ton of subcategory MDiv programs, and I'm sure maybe there's a seminary out there that's figured it out, is that they fail at being integrated.
Mm.
Less degrees means more integrated. And if you go to a prestigious school, such as Westminster Theological Seminary, for example, they're going to have the languages integrated in nearly every single class. You won't have to worry about going to take systematic theology without the Hebrew or the Greek being involved. Every good systematic theology that you read brings the Greek and the Hebrew. So why wouldn't you also integrate the languages into your systematic theological training? And that's really where I would challenge people into looking into their potential seminaries is figuring out what's not only important to them, but also figuring out what's important for your education. And I would argue that what's important for your education is something that is integrated. Now, something that I would also add onto this list on top of all of that is going to a confessional seminary, not a seminary that is just, okay, we're evangelical. I at one point had actually applied to a seminary. I won't say what school it was. I was accepted, but their confession of faith statement was only a few paragraphs long. Now, here's the problem with that. You're not going to be challenged in your education. You're going to go in and they're not going to put you on your heels, because what a confessional institution is going to do, and I'm not saying that it has to be a reformed confessional institution. I want to be very clear on that, but something that has a broad and deep confessional statement that makes that essentially says, hey, this is what we believe, this is what we're going to teach, and they're going to push you on your heels. Even if you come down to the point where you disagree, you're going to end up making a defense for why you disagree with them in the first place. It's not like approaching a seminary that's essentially a 5 use book. Like, here you go. Here's your 5 use book. And you don't know what you're left with. You're going to be challenged at a confessional institution. And you're going to be leaving that institution knowing what you believe in. And that's something that I would add on to. So what's important to you? What's important for ministry? And then I would definitely encourage individuals to look at confessional institutions for their seminary education.
Wow, those are excellent points. And I really like what you said, where just bringing those together a little bit, where it's not just going back to your earlier point, what you know, it's what you don't know, where when you're thinking about seminary education, I know I had to think about this. I was really thinking about a place, where could I go to learn? Not just where can I go and have a good time or talk about the stuff I want to talk about. It's where can I go to learn? And I think, like you said, that community aspect for a lot of people is going to be important. Where can I not only learn, but have those conversations and learning? And another point that I really appreciated from what you just said, and that related to my journey in seminary as well, is, yeah, having that confessional institution not only gives you something that you can actually hold on to and grapple with. And like you said, even if you don't agree, you'll be forced to think through the question at least and defend what you hold. But it's also that reality of ministry and, I think, reputation, where for me and my choice in seminary, I ended up going to the school affiliated with my fellowship. And that was a decision where I wanted a place I knew that was solid, grounded, orthodox. Like you mentioned earlier, a lot of schools, and I think this gets into history a bit and why some fundamentalists or Baptists or evangelicals are suspicious of seminary, but want to go to a school where you know it's orthodox, you'll get that foundation. But also think about ministry. People, when they're looking at pastors or looking at young men who are in seminary or thinking about church life, they will have some notions about where you go to school. They see one school, they might think, oh, that's not so good of a place, but they'll see another school and they'll know the people there. They'll have an idea about their doctrine, their respectable stance on orthodoxy. And that's something that does stay with you the rest of your life, I think. And I've heard that from older pastors and older gentlemen who said, oh, I'm glad I went here, or I wish I didn't go here. Where when you're thinking about seminary, you have to consider their confessional stances and what they are known for. That is a very big deal. So I guess a follow-up question I would have for you is, I know you visited, you have videos which are fantastic about some of your visits to different seminaries. So I would want to know, or maybe you could share here, and of course, I'll put a link below. Check out these videos for yourself. Those who are watching right now, they're fantastic. But maybe as you're thinking about seminaries and as you're thinking about where to attend, while you have those aspects of what they teach and what they'll press you on and the community there, maybe you want to spend some time talking about the seminary, I guess, facilities itself. I know we talked about this a bit, and you certainly got me thinking about that and changed my mind on some stuff. But when you're thinking about the seminary building or buildings, I suppose, what are some of the things that you're looking at or considering or play a part in that decision?
Right. So one of the things that you're going to realize as soon as you start doing your research at any seminary is that they're trying to sell you on the website. And the best way to get through that advertisement fluff, as I call it, is to go there.
Right.
Visit these seminaries. Some of the best seminaries, I can at least say for the States, possibly Canada too, they will give you a stipend for visiting. So you're going to spend a little bit of money out of your pocket to have a weekend getaway with a stipend check. And you get to visit on top of it. And this is, you know, the icing on top. You get to go visit the seminaries that you're considering. One of the seminaries I visited was Westminster, Philadelphia. And I got to go see the Liberty Bell with my wife. And we got to go experience the city on the coldest day of the year.
Oh, nice.
On President's Day weekend, and we did not know it was President's Day weekend. So it was full of tourists, but me and my wife enjoyed our travels. We've never been to a city together that was that large. And it was nice. But on top of that, I was actually able to visit the seminary. And one of the things that I got to experience at Westminster West that I couldn't get through online is seeing how the community interacts and where the money is being spent. And one of the things that I didn't know until I visited Westminster, Philadelphia, which I'm sure that I could have figured out online, but these are just things that you could have, you know, I was able to see with my own eyes and actually have engagement, is that Westminster, Philadelphia is currently undergoing some reconstruction plans. They're adding a new chapel, they're adding new classrooms. And so the classroom that I actually went in, the chairs were falling apart. And so the first question that went to my mind, I actually talked about this in my video of visiting Westminster, Philadelphia, is where's the money going? If I'm spending thousands of dollars, where's my money going? And then I go, aha, they don't care about the chairs because they're adding new buildings. And so that's something that you need to take into consideration. Maybe, for example, Westminster, Philadelphia isn't a school to go to now. Maybe it's a school to go to in 5 years when you want the newer buildings. Is that important to you? You might think, hey, you know, I don't really care about the way that a seminary looked. And then you visit and you're like, maybe I do. I don't know. And so that's something to take into consideration. And as I stated a little bit earlier, you can actually see the community. You can kind of get a gist of it whenever you're talking to your advisors over the phone. At least that's kind of how I felt, but to actually see it in action. And if I could be a bit blunt for a moment, and I don't know if this is going to hurt me down the road, I noticed that the community when I visited RTS Jackson was a lot better than when I visited Westminster, Philadelphia. Just hands down. The students actually wanted to visit, talk to the new guys. They were actually talking with one another. And, you know, that might just be with the atmosphere of Westminster West. They are a lot more prestigious academically. I did notice at Westminster West, a lot more students were studying. They were nose in the books, you know. Right. So what kind of institution do you want to be at? I'm not saying whether or not Westminster is the school to go to or not. I know it sounds like I'm talking bad about them. I'm really not. I'm just saying, like, from my personal experience, like, I realized as I visited, you know, these two seminaries, I found that I did like that there was a more inviting community at RTS as opposed to Westminster. But at the same time, you know, the benefit to Westminster is that it's highly academic. And if that's the kind of community that you want to be a part of, then that might be a school that, you know, you would want to be a part of. If you don't care about chairs falling apart, then maybe, you know, Westminster is a place to go to. And I'm not saying that as a negative way. I'm saying you might, as an individual, might actually want higher quality stuff. If you feel like you're spending thousands of dollars, you want to sit on the newest chairs and sit in the nicest buildings and have the nicest lounges. And that's okay. There's seminaries for that also have the same type of academic requirements as Westminster. You just have to ask yourself the question, what's important?
Right.
For me. And you can really see that when you visit a campus.
Yeah, that's so good. And I think that encourages people thinking about it. When you're thinking about what seminary to go to, you also have to be aware of what's important to you on those kind of levels, where if you're going to be spending a long time studying at this one place, if chairs are important to you, if having a nice facility is important to you, you better think about that. You're going to be spending a lot of time there. But if you're all about the studying, if you're not worried about where you're sitting, or if maybe you're commuting and you're heading back home, whatever it is, that's another thing to be concerned about. And I think that's probably a point that a lot of guys don't think about. It's the reality. You're going to be there physically, and what you're physically surrounded by, community-wise, facility-wise, that's something you have to consider. So, and I think you really gave us a couple of things to think about there. Thank you. Helpful. So
yeah, thank you.
Another question along those lines that maybe we can, this might be something we want to talk about when you're in seminary or going through that process, but I guess it ties into my next big question here. seminary, you're definitely going for the education. Education is super important. Like you said, those foundational skills that it's going to carry with you the rest of your life. Hopefully, you have a long and fruitful ministry, and that seminary education will be part of that foundation. But as you alluded to before with community and speaking to advisors, seminary is a lot more than the strictly in the class education that you get. There's a lot more to seminary. So something I wanted to ask you, as you're thinking about seminary and thinking about your seminary journey, what are some of the other things in addition to education you hope to either gain or be a part of there?
Right. So actually, one of the things that I looked for that was additional was finding a professor that was willing to mentor me individually. And that took a little bit of finding, a little bit of research. I already have one that's willing right now at an institution that I'm considering. Um, but and that's important to me because in my mind, I'm uprooting me and my wife. We're going to be moving out of state. None of the seminaries I'm looking to are where I live at. None
Hmm.
of them. So me and my wife are going to be uprooting, moving out of state, and I'm going to be going to a place that I'm not all too familiar with. Number one. And number two, I'm paying a lot of money. I mean, I think that, and this is kind of a side note, I think that you should try your best to get a scholarship. Do not pay full tuition for a seminary, but
Right.
that's a side note. Because I'm spending the money, find somebody to mentor you. And that's kind of my perspective. And I'm really going to aggravate them. That's why they're there. Open hours, open office hours. I'm going to knock on the door and be like, "Hey, I'm here. I don't know what we're talking about, but I'm paying for this. So we're talking
Right.
about something." And that's something that I've decided to do. Now, I know for other people, that might not be the case. They might actually, and very fortunately, might live in the local area and are part of the church of one of the professors, and they've already received that discipleship for many years. And so that might not be as important, but that's something I think that is worth considering for me. That's not necessarily like an advice that I would give to everybody, but it is possibly something that might be worth taking.
Hmm. And I think that's definitely advice where even if it's not a full out mentorship, I know for some people they'll have greater or less time. Maybe it doesn't work out. But what you said with going to those open office hours, that's encouragement I know I receive from other people where even if it's not a full out mentorship, which I'm sure for a lot of people can work and should work and they should get on it as you have, but even just connecting with the professors at any level, just recognizing that while these guys are professors of your classes, which is great, they're also people who have gone through seminary, also people who have gone through church life and have connections and wisdom where, to whatever extent you can, they are a resource. That's why they're there. Seeking after them, that's super important. And I'm really encouraged. And I wish I did what you did, where I certainly would have had the time, but I wasn't as proactive seeking that out. But when I did, I could say, that really opened up my eyes to what seminary has to offer. So that's really sound advice. Going to seminary, look for that mentorship, and I'm sure the professors there, that's why they're there. They love it. They don't, you might feel like you're annoying them, and maybe you are annoying them at times, but they love talking about theology as much as you love talking about theology. They love talking church planting, missionary work as much as you do. And that's their job. That's their life. So I don't think they'll be as annoyed as we think we are annoying them. So
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
they work at seminaries. I mean, that's exactly what their job is. They live and breathe the culture. I can say for a little bit of a personal testimony, when I did my undergraduate training at the New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary, I first started right when I was done with my training for the military. And I was arrogant and hot-headed, as most young guys who get out of the military. And so I didn't take advantage of that stuff, and I really regretted it. I've actually remorsed about this in some personal conversations I've had with Christian. And so I could definitely say from personal experience, like, don't think that you don't need these conversations,
Mm,
because you do. And I would definitely try to encourage you, if you can, to do it. Like I stated, you might be in that unique situation where you're going to the same church, or really, bottom line, isn't that important to you. I mean, I know that some people, I met people when I went to the New Orleans Seminary, decided, I'm 65, I'm retired, I'm going to go to seminary just so I can learn more about the Bible. So maybe those little mentorships aren't important for you. But for those people who are called to ministry and are going to be doing it for the rest of their lives, do it. Like, I'm pleading with you, because it's going to help out so much. And I'm really looking forward to being able to do that in my graduate education, because I surely didn't take advantage of that in my undergraduate education.
That's sound advice, and I'm glad that you shared that, because I think that makes it tangible for people, and that's something I've experienced as well, where we definitely need it. Where I think it's great, and I think it's good when guys are just aware of where they are in life and recognizing, even if they don't see it in themselves, but just knowing the general trend. Hey, I probably need mentorship. I probably need this kind of discipleship, and it's one of those things where you might as well take it up, even if you don't feel like you need it, because it's not going to hurt anything. And it
Mm.
might be a powerful reality check in there if you are in need of it. So I guess from there, I do have a few more questions, but I think this really is the kind of conversation that we'll have to come back to when you're in seminary, hear what you're thinking when you're there. So maybe I won't go too long, but maybe one question before concluding thoughts. I know that we've talked a little bit about how seminary and the local church comes together, and how you want to be invested in both. So maybe you just want to give us maybe some advice, or maybe some of the stuff that you're working out as you think about your life in the local church, as you plan on being in seminary. How do you think, and maybe I didn't prepare you for this one, so just whatever you come up with, how do you think your seminary education will play into your life at the church? How will that shape what opportunities you look for, or what kind of conversations you have with the leadership there? How do you think right now, and maybe a good question to ask, we can check in what the answer actually is later on, but how do you think those two things might relate for you?
Right. I actually think I can answer to this to some degree, because I did receive my undergraduate education from a seminary.
Right. Yeah.
So I would definitely say, number one, and this is something that I've not met a seminary student that's not struggled with this, right? Getting what you think theologically to the practicality,
Mm,
and I think you cannot forget that what you get in the mind must reach the heart. And that's with everything that you do in ministry, right? And I'm not trying to be charismatic when I say this, but I'm saying you can understand a textbook of worship, but unless you're actually worshiping,
right.
that means nothing. I mean, why know how to properly worship unless you're actually worshiping?
Mm,
And so in the local church, and how that relates is putting into effect how that actually happens. Um, I think seminaries are doing well right now onto requiring internships, because that's going to force students, while they're receiving an education, to be in the field. Not every seminary does this, and I'm not saying it even has to be a requirement, because I think that a Christian should know that what they're doing should probably be out in the field somewhere. I know that for many Baptists, they try to encourage you to actually partake in a ministry. I'm not going to go so far to make that kind of encouragement, because I think that really is up to the discernment of the individual. Some people cannot do education and ministry at the same time, and do not hinder any type of flock if
yeah.
you can't do both. That's just my thought.
That's good.
But that doesn't mean that you can't participate on a voluntary level. So you can ask the local pastor, while you're attending seminary, hey man, is there any way I can help? Look for ministries in the area. Here at the New Orleans area, we have Global Maritime Ministries, where I'm actually a chaplain of. I was a volunteer there for a year, and you can actually interact with international seafarers, and that's missions right at your front door. There's missions coming to you. There are other local ministries in the New Orleans area where you have homeless people. For one semester, I took it upon myself to actually go to New Orleans East, which, if you're familiar with the area, I know that you're not, but if you are familiar with the area, it is a impoverished area, and there's a lot of Vietnamese immigrants there. And I actually spent time going to a coffee shop and having amazing Vietnamese coffee, helping a woman learn English as she helped me learn Vietnamese so I could do ministry with her. Unfortunately, I didn't see any fruit come from that ministry, but it doesn't have to be a lot. I did that twice a week. And it was on a Tuesday and a Thursday, because that was the days that I went to drive to college and my seminary, and it was 20 minutes down the road. So I'm not saying become a pastor, become a minister, but what I'm saying is, do not be afraid of trying to figure out a way to apply what you learn theologically into the ministry setting, even if it's on a voluntary status. Because if you just spend 5 years getting a seminary education, and then you start applying it after your seminary education. I have talked to guys and they're very much like, oh my gosh, it's like two different worlds. And don't do that to yourself. Please go. I'm begging with you, please go to the local church, find something to volunteer. It could be once a week, it could be once a month, but that way at least you're getting something where you're integrating the education into the ministry, and you can start getting that training now. So that way, when you're done with the education and you actually go to the ministry that God's called you to go to, and that might be pastoral, you're not having to freak out. Oh, how am I supposed to explain the difference between dispensationalism and amillennialism? You can just tell them in a broken down format, because you've had that experience before in the past.
That's really good advice, Adam. And I have to say, I had that similar. So my seminary required an internship, and I was that guy at first who was kind of upset, where I was thinking, oh, I came to seminary to do the school stuff. Why are they sending me into an internship? But now I can say that that's exactly what happened, where I was forced to put into practice what I was learning about. And my pastor at my church where I did my internships was super helpful and super encouraging, where he would walk me through that stuff, and he would totally take into account that I'm in seminary and tried to give me feedback and assignments that related, but also filled in some gaps with my seminary education. And I think it was that, for me anyway, that immediate putting into practice. I just learned about, for example, the Trinity in seminary, and here I am at my church and youth group now, walking them through the Trinity and seeing how one informs the other, but also how the seminary class, there is a bit of a gap between explaining 13-year-olds the nuances of the Trinity. I won't go into that, but it was a good time. And the other point that you made, just finding like what you said, finding a ministry, having that on a voluntary basis, I think is important, where some of the guys at my seminary, they totally were aware that taking on a lot of stuff during the year while they're full-time in school, not a good idea. And as you said, I think that's worth saying again. You don't want to be a hindrance, or you don't want to be doing a terrible job in ministry because you can't take it on at that time. And I think that's where a lot of guys have to have the discipline to maybe say, maybe that's something I pursue in the summertime, or maybe that's something I do that once a month. And I think that's understanding who we are. That's been a theme throughout this conversation. I think a big part of going to seminary, thinking about seminary, is having a proper understanding of yourself, what you're good at, where you need to grow, and what you're able to take on. And that definitely applies to ministry and church life while you're in seminary. So that is fantastic advice. And that's my last big question here. So I'm going to right now just open it up. If you have one final conclusion or closing statement or encouragement you would want to give my audience, now is the time to make that.
Right. So I guess a final concluding statement is, realize what God's called you to do. And the reality might be you're not called to ministry. The reality might be you're not called to go to seminary. The reality is the calling might be to go to a seminary that you don't want to go to. And that takes a lot of discernment, that takes prayer, that takes reflection. One of the things I wanted to mention, Christian, before I had this opportunity, and it kind of came to my mind a couple of times, is we live in a day and age where you can participate in the local ministry and never have to leave. And I'm not against brick and mortar seminaries. As a matter of fact, I encourage brick and mortar seminaries. I like being in person. But here in the States, and I'm sure because you have online availabilities, two recommendations to people I would pick is Midwestern Baptist Theological Seminary and Covenant Baptist Theological Seminary. Both have fantastic online MDiv programs. Midwestern is shorter. So if you want to get something that's going through it while holding on to the 2000 Baptist Faith and Message, you're going to get that. And there's actually some solid dudes that teach there. Covenant Baptist Theological Seminary, I know this is going to make Christian happy, is a 1689 seminary. And they're going to give you something that's confessional. And I talked to you guys before about the importance of going to confessional institution. They're integrated. They're not as integrated as a brick and mortar. And I think that's due to the nature of the seminary. But if you are called to your local church and you know you cannot leave, there are other options. Do not risk the ministry that God's called you to go to, because that's more important than trying to travel all the way to another state or another country to make sure that you receive, the best seminary education ever. God's called you possibly to the ministry that you're at now. But at the same time, and I want to make this clarification, maybe God has called you to go to a seminary that might be across the state or across the country or whatever the case may be. And that's okay. I'm just saying, and this is very much the theme of this entire conversation, as Christian brought up, it's discernment, it's wisdom, it's self-reflection. And that's going to come with reading the word, prayer, and possibly talking to other people.
Yeah.
And, realizing like, hey, talk to your local pastor, talk to your elders, talk to your brothers in Christ, and be like, do you think I'm the kind of person that should be able to go to seminary? And maybe you're not going to like the answers that you get, but they might have some insights into you that you don't have. I'm not necessarily saying take their advice. They might be wrong, but they're going to give you insight that you might not even be thinking about yourself. And I think that would be where I would put my closing remarks.
Yeah. And that is a fantastic way to end this time where, like you said, prayer, reading the word, talking to your local pastor, your elders. I think that's going to be a constant theme with a lot of guys thinking about seminary. We're talking about going to learn about spiritual things. So we should definitely be aware that we have a God who calls on us to pray and discern these things spiritually, where we should make use of every resource we have available to really think through what we're doing and why we're doing it and how we should be doing it. So thank you for those reminders. And just that other reminder, 2020 online, it's getting better and better every year. And while I think, like you mentioned, the actual physical location will have certain advantages or realities just with the community and being able to interact face to face, if you're in that ministry, online still has and offers some great opportunities that are worth exploring. So with all that said, I think it's now that time where I close this out here. So I have to say thank you, Adam. This has been a fantastic time, a fantastic conversation. As I kept saying throughout, definitely going to have you back on, talk a bit more about this. But I also know that you're passionate about some other things that I'd love to talk to you about some other times. I know we have some plans in the future for a discussion on maybe the confessional side. But for those who don't know Adam or his channel, I encourage you, check it out. I'll put it in the description down below. He's got a YouTube page, a Facebook page, a Twitter, and is working on a website right now. We're waiting to see that. But check out his channel. Definitely make use of the videos he has there. I know myself, I went there. I was amazed, blown away by his fantastic series on the creeds and confessions. Just like if you watch my channel, bringing that church history to today. Adam's going through the early creeds right now. I think your last one was on
the Athanasian Creed. So I actually just finished the creeds, and I'm about to switch to the Reformed confessions here in a couple of weeks.
Fantastic. So I'm looking forward to that now, especially. But yeah, guys, seriously, check that out. You also have those reflections on your visits to different seminaries, and then you also had that we talked about a bit, the note-taking one, where you're into note-taking, biblical note-taking, and I think for a lot of people that is a hidden gem where they love reading their Bible and note-taking, and when you have a system, it could really open up your Bible reading, your devotional time. So check out Adam's channel. Really fantastic stuff, and I'm happy to hear where God leads you and where God takes you going forward. So Adam, keep it up. Look forward to watching more of your videos, hearing more about your seminary and your theological discernment. So please don't be a stranger, especially on this channel. We're going to have you back, but thank you for your time today with us.
Thank you, brother. God bless.
God bless you. All right, everyone, thanks for watching. This has been Christian's Colloquy, and I'll see you all again next Monday.